Welcome back to Mindset Rebooted. I'm Romi Sunga.
And I'm Sam Hay. We're going to be discussing how the Miami Heat just defeated the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo's discussion with a reporter after the game discussing whether he viewed his season as a failure.
All right, Sam, so get us up to speed. Giannis, with that reporter interaction from last night, what happened?
Listen, man, understandably so, Giannis was upset. He was frustrated. One can argue that what just happened was the greatest upset in NBA history. You can argue it. The Milwaukee Bucks had sat at the first seed all year long, essentially. And they had championship aspirations. The expectations were that they were going to win from a lot of people. And Giannis sitting at that podium had to realize that all of that just vanished. They just lost pretty badly in the series. And the reporter asked him, hey, do you view this season as a failure? And Giannis was upset about that. One, because the reporter asked him that same question in the previous year when they lost. And Giannis took it as it implied that they failed, which, yes, it did. I mean, he said it explicitly. They failed. But he took it to heart. He took it as, instead of it being about basketball, it almost came across as Giannis felt like the failure was just a failure as a person, is what it came across. And he had to check himself in that conversation. He was like, yo, look, my bad. You know, I don't want to make this a personal thing, but failure is not something that happens in sports. There's steps to success. And, you know, Michael Jordan, he won 6 championships, but he played 15 years. Does that mean that the other 9 years that he played were those years failures? And he's like, no. He said, hey, when you don't get a promotion every single year, you know, at your job, did you fail? No. It just means that you're striving towards something greater so that you can provide for your family and things like that. And what it came across was that, look, whether you view it as a failure or you view it as just steps in the right direction, it lets me know that there are different perspectives on success. And Giannis was looking at it at a more macro level, when other people were looking at it at the micro level. Giannis was looking at it at the level of, hey, I'm winning at life, so why would you call this a failure? And the reporter's looking at it as, well, the goal was for you to win a championship this season, and you did not accomplish that. So that can be constituted as a failure. Neither are wrong. It depends on what angle you're looking at, because success has macro and micro aspects to it. That is how we have to view success in our everyday lives. We're not going to win at every single thing that we do, but there are certain things that we have to legitimately accomplish in order to make it to the next level. And so what do you think about that? Like, do you believe that rather than viewing things under an overall umbrella of either success or failure, that we need to kind of segment it into like a macro versus a micro?
Yeah, I do think you need to go macro versus micro, or you could also say maybe long-term goals versus short-term goals. With that example of, you know, being a 15-year veteran athlete, that's a long-term goal or long-term success of that you're able to play for so long and be paid for so long and be able to support your families and, you know, be famous and stuff. That could be a long-term goal, that you have that legacy, so to speak. But a short-term goal is like, this season we need to win. The short-term goal is like, I need to learn certain moves so I could score more or get more, I don't know, assists and steals, the whole basketball stats. We go into football, you know, yardage, ones, you know, kick conversions and all that. I think it's super important to segment macro goals versus micro goals. The micro goals have a certain urgency because they're short term. They're like, hey, we need to win now or this year or I need to get a new job this year, or I need to, go on XYZ dates this year so I could find a long-term relationship, which will become a macro goal.
When you only look at it as that macro level of, there's steps to success, hopefully we come back next year and win a championship. Well, that could be deemed as wishful thinking. When we can pinpoint the deficiencies that led to this failure, right? And we can work on those things so that now you actually have the better chance at having a successful season. And so that would be my only issue that I had with his comments, right? If you look at his poor shooting, things like that, or you look at some of the poor coaching adjustments that took place, those are all things that will contribute to what someone will call a failure. And I think that was what I kind of wanted to hear from him in his response. Not that you're admitting that you suck at life and that, oh my gosh, we failed. No, it's just, this is what can be improved. These are the steps in which I'm going to take, which it's all micro at that point, so that you can contribute to achieving that overall macro goal.
That position that Giannis was in, you're recently fresh off the loss, not just a game loss, but you're kicked out of the playoffs, right? So you're emotional right there and you're expected to speak on it cool-headed. I don't think that's realistic at all. So asking something like that and being able to go in depth in your answer, I don't think you could expect that anywhere. It would have to be later on into off season where you've cooled down and you were able to reflect. What are some of the micro things we could fix in the future? What could I have done differently than we have? It's almost like we want to take emotion out of it or give time for emotion to level out. Mm-hmm. And then we could be more like scientists of, all right, what really happened that caused this result that I didn't want? What can I change? What can I learn from? So these are all micro actions. But these micro actions, when you keep stacking them up, it becomes a compounding effect towards our long-term goals, towards the macro success. So, for example, if we talk about financial security or personal finance, a lot of people at first, when you first start, it's like, hey, you just need to get a part-time job. You're a high schooler, get a part-time job so you can start earning some type of wage. And then as you go older, you get more skills, you start having an entry-level like a salary job. And then from there, every few years or so, you're trying to get higher. So that's the micro level of increasing your income. Mm-hmm. And then the big macro level is like, well, I'm going to have a family. I'm going to do whatever lifestyle goals you have. You're like, what's the amount of money I need in order to support all that? And it changes every year. So it's like knowing that you need money, but you also need to keep gaining skills in order to get closer to that money where it crosses. I think that's very important for people.
I think one of the things that you mentioned in that was the whole like taking a step back, reflecting. Because in that moment, like you said, it may have been unfair for that question to have been asked. But eventually that question has to be asked. If not by that person, it has to be asked by yourself. Right. And that's what we have to get into the habit of when we experience disappointment. Right? When our expectations are not being met, even if you're not cool-headed in that moment, like you said, during the off season, taking that moment to reflect, because change cannot happen without reflection. It just cannot. You have to be able to see where things went wrong, and you have to be able to admit to yourself. Because a lot of times too, what hinders us from achieving those macro goals is that we ourselves are in a state of denial, and I think that that's something that is very key to becoming successful.
Sometimes figuring out these micro goals or short-term goals that we have to fix, it's hard to figure out without someone telling you or someone prompting you to really light that fire. Because as you mentioned, if we only focus on long-term goals or macro success, we might just keep our eyes on a dream, but we're not putting in the daily work required to succeed. It's
very hard to be real with yourself. And one of the things that I've noticed too, though, is that you might have someone who is willing to light a fire under you, but you may not even be willing to listen to them. And so in those situations, I've noticed that there has to be a life event that happens
Yeah, it's like something where you're like, this sucks so much, I never want to feel this way again.
Correct.
And that's the reason for the change, the turning point.
It's the turning point. Because there was a saying that one of my former pastors used to say, which is, experience isn't necessarily the best teacher, but it sure is a hard one. And one of the reasons why experience is so powerful is because you actually feel it. It's not just words. You're going through it. Your five senses are experiencing it. And in those moments, you have the opportunity to sink or swim. It'll build character. You go through like the worst of times, the best of times, and all of that goes towards your development. I think that, like in the case of Giannis and the Bucks, this bad feeling is going to make them say, all right, we clearly need to improve. I don't want to feel like this anymore. I guess without getting too personal, has there ever been a time like where you're like, yo, I feel super bad about what's going on? Like you were stubborn listening to yourself or outside influences, and then it propelled you forward to say, all right, that's it. Transition.
Years ago, I worked at Target. So, when you go to Target and it's a busy time, the lines get really long. And there's usually like someone that's coordinating where the lines are to help expedite the pace. So that person is technically like the team leader or the supervisor of that area. I was that supervisor. And one particular afternoon, as a supervisor on the walkie-talkie, everyone's like, hey, are you good? Because we're very busy. I said, yeah, we're good. 5 minutes later, the store manager showed up and she's like, you're not good. And she took over on coordinating everything. And she decreased the amount of time that people were waiting in line because she knew how to make it more efficient. And so in that moment, she legitimately said, no, you don't got this, Romi. Like, and I was heated. I was like, how dare you say that? Like, I'm good. My ego was getting the better of me. I didn't want to feel that way again. So I used that emotion where I felt like she like humiliated me, so to speak. But I respected it because she did prove that I didn't have it. She increased our efficiency. She got through the lines a lot faster than what I could have done at that time. And I was like, I don't want to feel this way ever again. So I started studying. I was like, why did she do these things? How did she work the pedestrian traffic flow? How was she able to make sure she could respond to any immediate need when I usually got tied up with the customer or tied up with the situation? How did it always feel like she could just go to any single spot and she was always available? So I used that humbling moment of anger, embarrassment, shame, and I figured out micro tendencies that she did and also actions that she did, use it for myself, so that later on, like, no one ever questions me anymore when I was in that position. They're like, Romi, you got it? And I said, I do got it. And they're like, okay, cool. They never had to double check it again. Because I was like, man, I'm not going to feel this way again. I'm going to put it in your face. Like, I'm not going to call out any names. Like, she was a great person to work with. But in those moments where she calls you out, like, in your face, people don't like getting called out in their face like that. Especially when they say, no, you don't got it. And you're like, dude, damn it, I thought I did.
You know you did. But you legitimately thought you had it.
I did, yeah. I legitimately thought I had it, and that's why I was heated when she said I didn't. But when I saw that she was succeeding where I was not, I was like, okay, all right, well, you know what? I'm never going to let you say that I don't got it again. And so so that's the short-term goals. Like, I don't want you to ever have to come up and take my role away from me. Right. But the long-term view of it was that, like, hey, I want all the other leaders to know Romi's got it. If they ask Romi to do something, they could rely on him. So that's where the short-term goal or micro goal fed into the long-term or the macro goal.
It was like losing the battle to win the war, essentially, and it led to skill development. And I think that's the thing. You need skill development in order to achieve the micros that will help you to get to the macros. And I think that, that's obviously I've experienced the exact same thing. I remember when I remember when I was in the Navy at my first duty station. I had just moved up in ranks, and then I also just got qualified as both a plane captain and as someone who had their wings. It was a aviation warfare specialist, pretty much saying I knew some stuff about the aircraft, right? I knew some stuff in aviation, right? And so I'm thinking that I'm that guy because I just achieved these things. But then a situation occurred that I had not been trained for on paper, that I had never even read about. And I was just like, oh, snap. And then one of the guys who came out, who was more experienced, he looked at me and was like, he said, I don't even know how you even got your wings. Right? He was
yeah. Yeah, those moments you're like, you're heated, but at the same time, like that anger is hiding your shame. You know what I mean?
I was like, oh, snap. Now, it was embarrassing. And he was able to do his thing, whatever. But then I had to learn in that moment. I was like, okay, this is what I got to do. But here's the thing. After all that stuff, I ended up becoming the guy with the most qualified shift. I was able to train people very, very well. I was able to train them based on real experiences, not just... So according to chapter, you know, because a lot of times people are leaders from behind a desk and leaders from behind a book. As opposed to like, you know, having that actual bravado that comes with simmer down. I got you.
Yeah, real world experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that those are the different things that you need, you know, along the way in order to actually be successful. You got to be humbled. I think reflection and humility are the key ingredients, or two of key ingredients to be able to get to the point of achieving success at both a micro and a macro level.
If we didn't have a long-term lifestyle mentality, like, hey, Romi is going to be that guy that is going to be someone you can rely on when you need help for your whatever it is, work, volunteering, family, something. And you know you could trust him to succeed, right? So if that's my long-term goal or my long-term definition of success, like that made me be willing to accept those humbling moments as learning moments, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is you and I are we're directionally always trying to go in the right direction in terms of we want to be solid people to the people around us. We want to be reliable. And because that's our long-term goal, our macro goal, so to speak, anything that happens to us in a maybe interpersonal interaction or something that happens over a weekend or even the course of a semester or 3 or 6 months, we try and strive to be our best to learn and improve so that we could still be that ideal person in the future.
Yeah, I love that. It's the changing of the perspective, right? And what I've noticed too is that people who are only focused on that micro aspect rather than that big picture that you were just sharing, those people, they believe coming to a halt means coming to an end, you know? And I think that that's the wrong way to look at it. It's sometimes you just got to slow down and go faster, you know?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't feel that way when you're in it at that time, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it's your first time being like halting. Like, for example, when I was at Target, one of the reasons why I thought I was a shit is because I promoted quickly. Like I joined them just to be a part-timer so that I would have a little bit of cash while I was doing other stuff. Next thing I know, within a month, I was already a lead. I already had keys to money and stuff within 3 months. And then I was getting sent other places to get trained for other duties and responsibilities. Whereas there's people who've been there for like 2 or 3 years that weren't doing anything. I'm like, oh man, I'm hot. Like I'm that guy because I'm promoting so fast that when I did get humbled and when I started getting all these challenges that I couldn't overcome as quickly as before, at that moment I was like, man, I suck. When I didn't realize I was just propelling so quickly that I wasn't really having enough time to set the foundations properly as I got higher.
Yeah, I think that those are the dangers with having too much quote unquote success super quickly.
Yeah.
You're not able to fully appreciate what you actually have because, you know, like in the situation of Giannis, I'm not saying that he doesn't fully appreciate it, but I know he won his championship back in 2021. But people don't realize how hard it actually is to get to a championship and win it. Like how hard it is to make it out of a first, a second, a third, and then to complete a fourth round. it's so difficult. And so if you were able to achieve that feat, you might be thinking, okay, yeah, I'm going to be doing this every single year. But it's just not like that, you know? And same thing. Like when I ranked up super fast when I was in the military, I saw people who had been in the same rank for, years.
Yeah. And
like,
I'm going to do a pause real quick. Keep going on your story. But I also want to point out, again, because our long-term success for us as individual guys is that we want to be the guy for the people around us. We always want to be better. And because we always want to be better, we tend to just be like above average compared to our peers. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty sure anywhere you go, you tend to stick out, because that's how it's always been for me. Anywhere I go, like promotion seems to feel like it comes quick.
Yeah.
And if people are like, oh, you know, you can't always get promoted. Well, also think promotion is about responsibilities. It's about taking mentorship positions. It's about new jobs that people normally who are more senior than you, they're actually going to you, deferring to you for the decision making. That's also a type of promotion. So I feel that having that big long-term goal, that big ideal of ourselves, that's what helps us promote like this, which tends to also be a double-edged sword. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's true. It makes me think of that one expression. It was jack of all trades but master of none. And obviously,
but still, oftentimes better than a master of one.
Yes.
We got to finish the full quote.
I'm going to let you finish the quote, but I'm going to tell you how I'm going to apply it to my thinking in this segment. So I had to reflect on like why a lot of these guys would be upset either when they were not like promoting, or like even though they didn't promote, when they finally did promote, you know, they decided that they would stay in the military longer. And I was just always like, oh, well, I'm getting out after this point in time. And some people would look at me and be like, but why? You've already achieved like this, like you're already set to do a full career. And I guess in some respects, I wasn't able to fully appreciate the climbing through the ranks quicker. But the other guys who were not climbing through the ranks, what I noticed was that they were really great at their craft. They were exceptional a lot of times at what they did, but they were so focused on that one thing. Meanwhile, I was more so focused on being somewhat good and
just competent enough
to be dangerous in different fields.
Yeah.
So that it then shined, right? Like it's like, oh, okay, I can kind of count on him for this. And so those people, they were lacking in different things, but they were like subject matter experts in what it was that they knew. But it just wasn't enough to say, I trust you to also deal with this, and this. And I realized that that's probably one of the reasons why we had a certain level of success in terms of either being promoted officially or just being handed more responsibilities, because we were thinking bigger picture. If I'm able to get a whole bunch of these small different things going for me, it's going to lead to this and this and this, which is my ultimate goal, as opposed to, oh, I just want to be the best I can be at this one thing. And then what's your goal outside of it? Oh, I don't know, but I love what I do. You know, I think that those are the pros and cons that come with that, like that way of thinking. And so I had to really reflect on it to understand that it wasn't because I was just crazy better or more successful than everybody else. It's because our focuses were completely different, you know. And if it would have came down to a technical issue with what they were great at, if like everything was like, hey, let's reward the person right now who is so technically, you know, competent in this area, well, I would be the one who would take a huge backseat to that person. And so, you know, in when it comes down to thinking of success on a macro and micro level, I really believe that the key to success in that way is understanding what your big picture goal is, and then making sure that the miniature goals or the steps you take en route to that big picture goal are in alignment with that goal.
Absolutely. And there's going to be different iterations of what that big picture goal will look like. And it's okay to change it as long as we're going in the right general direction. I think that's the most important part. Because, it's been over 10 years since I've been working on personal development, where I'm like, who do I want to be when when I'm old or retired? Who do I want to be when my grandkid asks, what did I used to do? Like being a role model. It always kind of changed on the specific role, but it always had the general same characteristics. Like you knew that you could rely on me. You know that when you need some kind of maybe physical support with moving furniture, it's as simple as that may sound, or whether that's financial support in terms of career development and all that, you could always rely on me. So like, since that's the general direction I want to go, that's what makes it easier that in the immediate times, I'm like, all right, what can I just gain to add on towards that goal? Mm-hmm. And so I agree. You need to focus. You got to find out what you want to focus on long term. But I also just want to give you that caution of it doesn't have to be so rigid that if you feel like it has to change a year from now, you don't feel guilty for changing it. It's okay. We are people who gain new experiences, and that's how our perspectives get influenced.
Yeah, I agree. Because if you do have to change it and you have the way of thinking that you just framed, you're not going to look at it as a failure.
Yeah, you're just like, okay, cool. I'm learning more. And then was it Michael Jordan? Since we're on basketball, right? Mm-hmm. He was he him that said, or was it Kobe that said, "I never lost a game. I just ran out of time."
I'm not sure which one of them said it.
Okay, I'm pretty sure it was one of those two guys. But when I think about it like that, at first I'm like, technically you lost the game, right? Because there's only such an amount of time in the game.
Yeah.
But then like when I think about it, like if I get out of a micro point of view, I'm like, okay, like if I think about like, all right, if you're the baddest basketball player ever, and like when we look at it on what people say, like when they do come play up against you,
yeah,
then I'm like, okay, I understand the macro of, but it, like it's a weird saying.
It's a weird one.
But that, like those weird sayings also makes me reflect. I'm like, okay, well, like how am I as a person? Do people know what my goals are long term? Or do they only see me short term and then they're kind of guessing who I am long term and vice versa? This is a tangent. I was just curious about that part.
No, and that's okay. Like, I know the one thing that Michael Jordan did say was that like he needed to fail in order to succeed, right? Yeah. Like,
a lot of champions say that. A lot of people who have success, like on the business side, like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mark, they all failed multiple times before they got big. Same with there's only a couple of unicorns where their first thing was the best thing, like Jeff Bezos. That was his first thing and it blew up. But like statistically, that's less than 1% of people who have the first thing that they try is actually the thing that they succeed with. Yeah,
and I think the other thing too is just changing your understanding of the word failure, right? Because failure has such a negative connotation, right? Where it's like, okay, like you failed, all right, you suck. Like, but in this aspect, if you think about what Jordan was saying when he said he had to fail in order to succeed, like let's just say he was just winning. Okay, let's just say he wasn't failing. If he was winning, okay, he may not have achieved peak performance though. Because if something seems to just be working, I might just keep it status quo, keep it the same. But when I fail, that's my opportunity to really dive into how I can really improve this thing, take it to a whole different level and maximize my potential, which I might not do if I'm just so accustomed to just winning. I might get to a state of where it's expected. I might take it for granted. I don't appreciate it fully. And I think that that's what I've seen a lot of times with people, like when certain things are just a natural knack for them, because I've done that myself. You get lackadaisical.
Yeah.
So the failure is that wake-up call. It shouldn't be viewed as end. It should just mean, like we've said in previous episodes, it's a pivot in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's simple. But I will say this. I disagree that if he lost a game, that it will, like whatever he said, oh yeah, ran out of time. No, you lost. Yeah. It's clearly a loss.
Yeah, like because the game has time stipulations, right? Yeah,
it's a loss.
Yeah, I'm gonna look that up after the show to see like who said it and what was the context.
Like they were just trying to be deep. No, you lost.
I don't know. Okay, we'll see. I got nothing else to add on to this. I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah. If you got great value out of this episode, please make sure you subscribe to this podcast and that you share it with someone else so that they can get great value as well. It's been a great conversation. Until next time, Mindset Rebooted. Sometimes when things go wrong, you can't blame life. Cause when you shot your shot, what was your aim like? What were you targeting? Cause if it ain't right and you still go with it, then that is on you.